The process of Muhammad Ali's seizure of power in Egypt was a long three-way civil war between the Ottoman Turks, Egyptian Mamluks who had ruled Egypt for centuries, and Albanian mercenaries in the service of the Ottomans. It ended in victory for the Albanians led by Muhammad Ali of Egypt. The three-way struggle followed the French invasion of Egypt by Napoleon. After the French defeat by the British, a power vacuum was created in Egypt. The Mamluks had governed Egypt before the French invasion and still retained much power. Egypt was officially a part of the Ottoman Empire, and Egypt still had many Ottoman Turkish troops who had been sent to evict the French. Many of the best Ottoman troops were from Albania, then a province of the Ottoman Empire. Albanians under Tahir seized Cairo from Husrev Pasha. In March 1803, the British evacuated Alexandria, leaving a power vacuum in Egypt. Muhammad Bey al-Alfi had accompanied the British them to help restore the power of the Mamluks. In their attempts to return to power, the Mamluks took Minya and interrupted communication between Upper and Lower Egypt. About 6 weeks later, the Ottoman governor of Egypt, Husrev Mehmed Pasha, finding himself in a financial bind and unable to pay all the troops under his command, attempted to disband his Albanian Bashi Bazouks without pay in order to be able to pay his regular Turkish soldiers. The Albanians refused to disband, and instead surrounded the house of the Defterdar, who appealed in vain to Husrev Pasha to satisfy the claims. Instead, the Pasha commenced an artillery bombardment from batteries located in and near his palace on the insurgent soldiers who had taken the house of the Defterdar, located in the Ezbekiya. The citizens of Cairo, accustomed to such occurrences, immediately closed their shops and armed themselves. The tumult in the city continued all day, and the next morning a body of troops sent out by Husrev Pasha failed to quell it. The Albanian commander Tahir Pasha then repaired to the citadel, gaining admittance through an embrasure, and from there began a counter-bombardment of the Pasha's forces over the roofs of the intervening houses. Soon thereafter, Tahir descended with his guns to the Ezbekiya and then laid close siege to the governor's palace. The following day, Husrev Mehmed Pasha fled with his women, servants, and regular troops to Damietta along the Nile. Tahir then assumed the government, but within 23 days encountered trouble due to inability to pay all of his forces. This time, it was Turkish troops who went without pay, and they in turn mutinied and assassinated Tahir Pasha. During the course of the mutiny, the governor's palace was burnt and plundered. A desperate, prolonged, and confusing conflict then ensued between the Albanians and Turks, with the divided Mamluks oscillating between the two factions, or attempting to regain power on their own behalf. Muhammad Ali assumes control and captures Ahmed Pasha. Tahir was replaced as commander of the Albanians by Muhammad Ali, one of the regimental commanders. Fearing for his position from the Ottomans, he entered into an alliance with the Mamluk leaders Ibrahim Bey and Osman Bey al-Badisi. With Husrev Pasha fortifying himself at Damietta, the Turkish troops in the vicinity of Cairo acclaimed Mufti Zayd Ahmed Pasha, the Ottoman mayor of Medina, as the new governor. Muhammad Ali, however, refused to surrender Cairo to him. In reordering his forces to meet the new threat, he also removed the Mamluks from Giza, where they had been invited by his predecessor, Tahir. Mufti Zayd Ahmed Pasha established himself at the mosque of al-Zflhi, which the French had converted into a fortress, but was eventually cornered and besieged by Muhammad Ali and his Albanian troops in the Cairo citadel, and compelled to surrender. Among the prisoners, those of the Turkish troops who had been involved in the assassination of the former Albanian commander, Tahir Pasha, were put to death. Capture of Husrev and Damietta. Muhammad Ali gave control over the Cairo citadel to his Mamluk allies. Soon after, they marched against Khusrev Pasha, who had been joined by a considerable number of Turks in a well-fortified position at Damietta. Khusrev was defeated, captured, and brought to Cairo by the Albanians. The Bashi Bazouks sacked Damietta, but Khusrev was treated with respect. Trabluslu Ali Pasha attempts to regain control. Days later, Trabluslu Ali Pasha landed at Alexandria with a firman from the Ottoman Porte appointing him the new governor of Egypt, and assumed control of the remaining Turkish forces. He threatened the Mamluk Beys, now virtual masters of Upper Egypt, as well as of the capital and nearly all of Lower Egypt. Muhammad Ali and his Mamluk ally, al-Badisi, therefore descended on Rosetta, which had fallen into the hands of a brother of Trabluslu Ali Pasha. The town and its commander were successfully captured by al-Badisi, who then proposed to proceed against Alexandria. His troops, however, demanded back pay which he was unable to provide. During this delay, Trabluslu Ali Pasha destroyed the dikes between the lakes of Abu Kir and Mariatis, creating a moat around Alexandria. Unable to proceed with operations against Alexandria, al-Badisi and Muhammad Ali returned to Cairo. The troubles of Egypt were exacerbated by an insufficient flood of the Nile, resulting in great scarcity. Aggravated by the onerous taxation the Mamluk Beys were forced to resort to in order to pay the troops. Riots and violence continued in the capital, with the Bashi Bazouks under little or no control. Meanwhile, Trabluslu Ali Pasha had been behaving with brutality towards the French in Alexandria. He received written instructions from the Ottoman Sultan, which, in an effort to sow dissension and mistrust between Muhammad Ali Pasha and his Mamluk allies, he sent to Cairo and caused to be circulated there. The Ottoman Sultan announced that the Mamluk Beys could live peaceably in Egypt with annual pensions of 15 purses and other privileges, provided the government returned to the hands of the Turkish governor. To this many of the Beys assented, and in the process opened a rift with Muhammad Ali Pasha and the Albanians. The Mamluks had already been suspicious of their Albanian allies, having previously intercepted letters addressed to them from Trabluslu Ali Pasha, endeavoring to win their alliance as well. Trabluslu Ali Pasha advanced towards Cairo with 3,000 men to discuss his resumption of control. The forces of the Beys, still with Muhammad Ali Pasha and their Albanian allies, advanced to meet Trabluslu Ali Pasha at Shalakin, forcing the Ottoman governor to fall back on a place called Zufite. At this point, the Albanians managed to seize Trabluslu Ali Pasha's transport boats, capturing soldiers, servants, ammunition, and baggage. They then demanded to know why he had brought such a large host with him, contrary to both custom and a prior warning to not do so. Finding his advance blocked, reluctant to retreat with his forces to Alexandria, and being surrounded by the enemy in any case, Trabluslu Ali Pasha attempted to give battle, but his men refused to fight. He therefore abandoned his troops and went over to the camp of the Mamluk Beys. His army was eventually allowed to retire to Syria. With Trabluslu Ali Pasha in the hands of the Beys, a horseman was seen to leave his tent one night at full gallop, and it was discovered that he bore a letter to Osman Bey Hassan, the governor of Caen. This gave the Mamluks a welcome pretext to rid themselves of him. Trabluslu Ali Pasha was sent under an escort guard of 45 men towards the Syrian frontier. About a week later, news was received that during a skirmish with some of his own soldiers, he had fallen mortally wounded. Return and flight of al-Alfi. The death of Trabluslu Ali Pasha produced only temporary tranquility. On February 12, 1804, the Mamluk leader Muhammad Bey al-Alfi returned from the United Kingdom, splitting the Mamluks into two parties. One gathered around al-Alfi and the other around al-Badsi, the latter having by then gained an ascendancy among the Mamluks. The guns of Citadel and of the palace were fired 3 times each in al-Alfi's honor at news of his return, but preparations were simultaneously begun to oppose him before he arrived in Cairo. Al-Alfi's partisans gathered opposite Cairo and held nearby Giza, when Hussein Bey, one of al-Alfi's relatives, was assassinated by emissaries of al-Badisi. Muhammad Ali Pasha seized upon this as a pretext to restore order, and took possession of Giza, which was given over to his troops to pillage. Unaware of these events, al-Alfi embarked at Rashid and made his way to Cairo. Encountering a party of Albanians south of the town of Manfith, he was surprised in an ambush and only escaped with difficulty. Al-Alfi then made his way to the eastern branch of the Nile, but the region had become dangerous and he fled to the desert. Though he had several close escapes and at last secreted himself among a tribe of Bedouin Arabs at Ras al-Wgdi, al-Badisi and the Albanians fall out. In the meantime, the fortunes of al-Alfi's main Mamluk opponent, al-Badsi, began to decline. In order to satisfy the Albanian troops' demands for pay, he gave orders to levy heavy contributions from the citizens of Cairo, that roused the citizenry to open rebellion. The Albanians, alarmed for their safety, assured the populace that they would not allow the public order to collapse, and Muhammad Ali issued a proclamation to that effect and offered other concessions to calm the public. Although the demands for pay had been the cause for al-Badisi's onerous levies that led to the public disturbances, Muhammad Ali Pasha's proclamation and concessions resulted in the Albanian forces gaining in popularity amongst the citizens, at the expense of the Mamluks. They soon took advantage of the opportunity. 3 days later the Albanians attacked the houses of al-Badisi, as well as that of the aged Mamluk leader Ibrahim Bey. Both barely managed to escape. Upon hearing of the attack on the leaders' houses, the Mamluks in the Cairo citadel opened an artillery bombardment on the houses of the Albanians which were situated in the Ezbekia, but, on hearing of the flight of their chiefs, they evacuated the citadel. Muhammad Ali Pasha, on gaining possession of the Cairo citadel, proclaimed Mahmud Khosrev Pasha governor of Egypt. For 1 day and a half Khosrev enjoyed the title. Then the friends of the late Tahir Pasha succeeded in killing him. Cairo immediately descended into violent chaos at the hands of the triumphant Albanians, who ransacked and looted the houses of the Mamluk chiefs, whose harems met with no mercy at their hands. The Albanians then invited Khurshid Ahmed Pasha to assume the reins of government, and he without delay proceeded from Alexandria to Cairo. In the meantime, the forces of the partisans of al-Badisi were ravaging the countryside a few miles south of the capital and intercepting the river-borne corn supplies. Soon thereafter they advanced to the north of Cairo and successively took Bilbais and Glube, plundering both, destroying the crops, and slaughtering the livestock. Cairo was in a state of tumult, suffering severely from a scarcity of grain, as well as from the heavy exactions of the Pasha to meet the demands of his troops, whose numbers had been augmented by Turkish detachment. The shops were closed, and the unfortunate people assembled in great crowds, crying, "Why Latif? Why Latif?" Events were then further complicated by the reappearance of al-Alfi, who joined forces with Osman Bey Hassan. Both al-Alfi and Hassan had professed allegiance to the Pasha, but they soon turned against him and advanced upon the capital from the south. The forces clashed with those of Muhammad Ali Pasha, and managed to seize from him the two fortresses of Tur. Muhammad Ali managed to speedily retake the fortresses in a night assault utilizing 4,000 infantry and cavalry. However, he was then forced to turn his attention northward, where the other Mamluks on that side of Cairo attacked and penetrated into the capital's suburbs. They in turn were defeated a few days later in a battle fought at Shubra, with heavy loss on both sides. This double reverse temporarily united the two Mamluk parties of al-Badisi and al-Alfi, although the two chiefs remained personally antagonistic. Al-Badisi shifted his forces to the south of Cairo, and the Mamluks gradually retreated towards Upper Egypt. There, the governor sent against them 3 successive expeditions, and many inconclusive battles were fought without decisive result. During this period another calamity befell Egypt. About 3,000 Kurdish Delhi light cavalry arrived in Cairo from Syria. These troops had been sent for by Khurshid Ahmed Pasha in order to strengthen himself against the Albanians, but their arrival resulted in the immediate return of Muhammad Ali and his Albanians from the campaign against the Mamluks in the south. The Delhis, rather than aid Khurshid Ahmed Pasha, were the proximate cause of his overthrow. Cairo was ripe for revolt. Khurshid Ahmed Pasha was hated for his tyranny and extortion, and reviled for the misconduct of his troops, especially the Delhis. The sheikhs enjoined the people to close the shops, and the soldiers clamored for pay. At this juncture a firman arrived from Constantinople conferring on Muhammad Ali the governorship of Jeddah. Within a few days, however, he managed to seize Egypt instead. Muhammad Ali ousts Khurshid Ahmed Pasha. On May 17, 1805, the sheikhs, with an immense concourse of the inhabitants, assembled in the vicinity of the governor's residence, and the ulema, amid the prayers and cries of the people, wrote a statement of the wrongs which they had endured under the administration of Khurshid Ahmed Pasha. The ulema intended to go to the citadel and present the statement to the governor, but they were apprised of intended treachery on Khurshid Ahmed Pasha's part. The following day, after holding another council, they proceeded to Muhammad Ali and informed him that the people would no longer submit to Khurshid Ahmed Pasha, as related by Muhammad Ali. When asked whom they would have, they replied that they would accept Muhammad Ali Pasha himself to govern them according to the laws, for they saw in his countenance that he was possessed of justice and goodness. Muhammad Ali seemed to hesitate, and then complied, and was at once invested. On this a bloody struggle began between the two pashas. Khurshid Ahmed Pasha, being informed of the insurrection, immediately prepared to withstand a siege in the Cairo citadel. 2 chiefs of the Albanians deserted Muhammad Ali and joined Khurshid Ahmed Pasha's party, while many of his soldiers deserted him and went over to Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali's strength lay in the popular support of the citizens of Cairo, who looked on him as a savior from their afflictions, and great numbers armed themselves, and with the Sayyid Omar and the sheikhs at the head, commenced to patrol and guarding the city at night. On the 19th of the same month Muhammad Ali commenced a siege of Khurshid Ahmed Pasha in the citadel. A few days later, Khurshid Ahmed Pasha gave orders to cannonade and bombard the city. For 6 days the bombardment continued, while the citadel itself was subject to counter-bombardment in turn from batteries located in nearby hills. Muhammad Ali's position at this time became very precarious. His troops grew mutinous due to a arrears in the pay a lieutenant of Khurshid Ahmed Pasha's, his leader, who had commanded one of the expeditions against the Mamluks, advanced to the relief of his commander, and the latter ordered the Delhis to march to his assistance. The firing ceased on the Friday, but began again on the eve of Saturday and lasted until the next Friday. On the following day, news came of the arrival at Alexandria of a messenger from Istanbul. That night in Cairo presented a curious spectacle. Many of the inhabitants, believing that this envoy would put an end to the miseries, fired off their weapons as they paraded the streets with bands of music. The Silada, imagining the noise to be a battle, marched in haste towards the citadel, while its garrison sallied forth and began throwing up entrenchments in the quarter of Arab al-Ysgr, but were repulsed by the armed inhabitants and the Albanian soldiers stationed there. During this time, the cannonade and bombardment from the citadel, and on it from the batteries on nearby hills, continued unabated. The envoy brought a firman confirming Muhammad Ali Pasha as governor of Egypt, and ordering Khurshid Ahmed Pasha to go to Alexandria, there to await further orders, but this he refused to do, on the ground that he had been appointed by Hatay Sharif. The artillery ceased firing on the following day, but the troubles of the citizenry were increased rather than lessened, for law and order suffered a near-total breakdown. Murders and robberies were daily committed by the soldiery, the shops were all shut and some of the streets barricaded. While these scenes were being enacted in Cairo, al-Alfi and his Mamluks were besieging Damanhur, and the other Mamluk beys were marching towards Cairo, Khurshid Ahmed Pasha having called them to his assistance. However, Muhammad Ali Pasha intercepted their advance and forced them to retreat. Soon thereafter, a squadron under the command of the Turkish High Admiral arrived at Abu Qir Bay, with dispatches from the Ottoman Sultan confirming the former envoy's firman, and authorizing Muhammad Ali Pasha to continue to discharge the functions of governor of Egypt. Khurshid Ahmed Pasha at first refused to yield, but at length, on condition that his troops be paid, he evacuated the Cairo citadel and embarked for Rosetta.